As I sat down to read the chapters from Teletheory, I thought that I now had a firm grasp on how my story was structured and what it tried to achieve. I was ready for some heavy theory, but after our discussions with Cecilia last week, I thought I was ready for Ulmer to really get into this idea of a my story. But boy was I wrong. Even now, I'm not really sure what it all meant. I would start to get an inkling of what he was trying to say, and then he would switch topics. I kept on having the feeling that the root of what he was trying to get at wasn't this complicated, but somehow it was coming off as this complicated. I can now see why we need to come up with a way of explaining these ideas to freshmen. But as I waded through the pages, I tried to pull out some of the key concepts and figure out how all this was related to the my story concept we talked about last week. I also did what almost any electric learner would do in a similar situation. I looked online for a summary of Teletheory, hoping I could get a succinct overview of the book and the chapters I read would make more sense. And while Wikipedia didn't give me anything useful, some of the other sites did, and it helped clarify things a little. I was finally beginning to understand the point of this teletheory, and I went back to the chapters then, looking for a definition of sorts, and found where Ulmer said its function was to devise a genre integrating the features of oral, literate, and video discourse. Something then clicked in my head. Was this one of Ulmer's reasons for creating the My Story, to merge all three apparatuses into one? Cecilia seemed to do this with her My Story. She utilized video, herself speaking on the screen, and even words displayed instead across the screen with music in the background. Finally, things were beginning to make more sense. Next, I went back online and searched again for references of Teletheory and My Story. I found a note from a paper mentioning that in Teletheory, Ulmer states that a My Story doesn't make connections vertically, but horizontally. This helped to explain an idea I was having trouble with last week as I watched Cecilia's My Story. In my Pecha from last week, I talked about how my education had pounded into me the idea of a standard thesis statement. This thesis statement had originally made it difficult for me to understand Cecilia's My Story at first. And though afterwards I was beginning to understand that the structure of a My Story was different, I couldn't figure out how to put this all into words. The idea that a My Story is organized horizontally and not vertically made a second light bulb kind of go off in my head. That the academic paper that I was taught on how to do is arranged with the thesis statement at the beginning, then all the supporting items arranged below it. Each of these items reference then how it supports the thesis statement from the beginning. Thinking of a My Story as being structured in a horizontal arrangement really helped me visualize it. All the parts of a My Story are equal. There's something similar between them, and altogether they are a My Story, but they also have a kind of standalone power as well. They're not simply there to provide evidence for some thesis. Each of Cecilia's My Story videos were powerful and thought-provoking and intriguing in their own right, but they also built on each other to help explain Cecilia's story. I don't think any of her videos or any segments of a My Story should be arranged in a way to make one more prominent or more important than another, because it's not organized in a vertical hierarchical fashion, it's displayed horizontally. After all of this, I'm not 100% sure that I'm on the right track. So then if a graduate student enrolled in a small seminar class is having trouble grasping this concept, how would you teach this to undergraduates? Or, like Sam brought up last week, how do you help freshmen understand what a My Story is so they can do one in class? Helping students understand this vertical versus horizontal arrangement is a start, and may get them away from this thesis statement and paper structure that is being hammered into them in their other classes. I also like the idea of a puzzle as a metaphor as well. Each piece is needed to complete the picture. But one section of the readings that really helped me understand Ulmer was when he was talking about mysterography and broke it up into the different pieces. Probably this is due to the fact that I am a woman and a history major, but the section on her story really seemed to make sense to me, perhaps also would to undergraduates as well. This will probably depend, though, on the background of the students themselves, but a feminist critique on the traditional historical narrative is being taught in some high schools or freshman history classes. They were taught in mine. Her stories are teaching students to view the past from a different perspective. And though this example is not a true historical event, when I think of the feminist critique, one of the things I think of is the book The Handmaid's Tale. The book is a dystopian tale about the events that occur after a totalitarian Christian government has overthrown the United States, but it's not told from multiple perspectives or even from a male character. The main character in the story is Offred, a handmaiden who lives in an upper-class household for reproductive reasons. Because the commanders and wives are older and infertile, these young women are brought into the household in order to bear the children for the rich family. There's a lot more to the story than that, but I remember it because of its focus on Ofra and her perspective. What also makes it a unique story, though, is that in the epilogue it says that the book was presented at a symposium after they had found cassette tapes recorded by this young woman during this turbulent time. So it's as if in the far future times are back to normal, and they are now studying this turbulent time period and are using this woman's particular history to understand it from a different perspective. So even though this is a fictional story, I found that this book to help me grasp how her story is relevant to my story. Gender, sex, race, and location causes everyone to have alternative styles of thinking. Developing one's my story allows one to look at the world through their own perspective and give their own experiences importance, something that's come around with the development of her stories. This is doubly important because a film, TV, advertising, etc. is arranged according to a male perspective, a male look. This topic was a topic we covered in visual communication last semester. It explained how women were arranged in the form displayed with the idea that men were the primary audience. And as we continue towards an electric world, we are defining ourselves according to a look. This worries me just a little in this respect, because if the male look continues to be the dominant perspective, will we start to characterize ourselves as an image that men look at? I think that my story is an effective tool and helps turn this perspective back in towards ourselves.